You're listening to the He Shoots, He Draws podcast, the show about photography, design, creativity, and more, with your hosts Dave Clayton and Alan Hess.
Hi, thanks for joining us here at He Shoots, He Draws. And I've said it many times before that the episodes haven't been as thick and fast as they used to be, but that's just purely down to work commitments and myself and Alan having 8 hours between us and both being available. But we are still keeping going. We've still got guests coming in and lined up, but they're just going to be a kind of as and when basis at the moment. But every once in a while, you just have a guest come along completely out of the blue. And this was completely down to Alan. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, always have been. I've credited Star Trek, Thunderbirds, Time Tunnel, those kind of 60s programs as being something that convinced me or kind of shaped me into being a graphic designer. So having grown up with Star Trek, it's just been something that I've always really loved. And then one day Alan throws out to me that he knows the guy that's the production, he's the guy that does the production or the set production on Star Trek and The Boys. His name's Dave Blass, and I said to Alan, "Man, I've been following Dave Blass on Twitter. I know who he is. I've been seeing all the behind the scenes." And it turns out that Alan and Dave go back a while. So he said, "Well, let me ask and see if I can get him on the show." And me being a 57-year-old man acting like a 12-year-old giddy child because we've got someone from Star Trek on was absolutely yes. Whenever we can, we'll do it. And Dave blessed us with 3 hours of his time. We chatted about Star Trek and TV and his job and his background in part one. And we're going to split it into two parts because the second half is more about his music photography. So if you want to listen to both, it's going to be broken up. But yeah, the first one's just over an hour and a bit. We're going to be talking about all things Trek and TV and production, direction, all that kind of stuff, artwork. It was really interesting. I got to ask Dave a ton of questions that I wanted the answers on. It's incredible the people he's worked with. So it's a really good interview. I really enjoyed it and hope you do too, especially. I mean, you don't have to be a Star Trek fan, but it helps. But Dave does talk about the industry and the impending writers' strike as well. So, strap in. We're going to boldly go where no podcast has gone before, apart from the other ones that he's been on. And I hope you enjoy it. And I'm going to hand over to the show and myself and Alan and Dave. And I hope you enjoy it. So here we go. Hello and welcome to another episode of He Shoots, He Draws. And today's episode kind of came by surprise because our guest is someone who I'm super interested in because of his background. But Alan just casually threw out that he knew this guy through his photography career. And I knew our guest's name through something else that I was interested in. So Alan got in touch with him and he very kindly said he'd be on. So welcome to He Shoots, He Draws, Dave Blass.
Thank you very much for having me.
Right, now before we go on, I've got one question to ask you after I've said something about you. Okay. Yep. So you're not only an accomplished music photographer, you're also a production designer on TV series. You're Emmy nominated, Art Directors Guild nominated. You've worked on multiple shows like Picard, The Boys, Justified, Preacher, Amazing Stories, Constantine, and loads more. Where did it all go wrong?
Yeah, it goes wrong all the time. And you know, it's funny. Sometimes I have to do the reality check of, especially on Star Trek, you'd be having the worst day and everything's going wrong and this is happening and there, and then you get a phone call. They're like, "Oh, you need to come to set," and I'm like 3/4 of the way to set to figure out a problem that I'm all this stuff, and I go, "Pause. Your worst day, your worst experience that you're having right now is having to go to set to explain warp core dynamics to a bunch of actors on Star Trek." Or I get another time, it's like, "Oh, Patrick doesn't understand." And I go, "I'm sorry. I'm having a bad day, but my bad day is surrounding the fact that I have to go to set to explain why Sorry and Brandy is important in Star Trek and why Picard would notice this and realize the whole thing and Guinan and the thing." I'm going, yeah, I'm living like 8 million people's dreams. I need to just
Yeah.
shut the fuck up and suck it up.
Yeah, it sucks to be
So
you, eh?
yeah, but it's like anything else. You sit there and you go, uh, for every good thing, there's a bad thing. That it's like, I tell people they're like, you doing this? I go, yeah, about 10 years ago, I was doing The Biggest Loser.
Yeah.
Now it's like I did 8 million crappy Roger Corman movies. I did this, I did that. I did a show for Fox called Who's Your Daddy? It was a series where it was a reality show where they take a girl who was given up to for adoption and they present her with 10 guys, one of which is the guy that gave her up for adoption. And then she goes out and goes on dinner and events with these guys. And it's like, we're into like 14 days of shooting this thing. And it was like on day 4, we all kind of clue into the fact that it's like, okay, so for one of these guys, this is his daughter. For the other ones, these are dates.
Yeah.
It was like, and it was like, and then like the show was called Reunited, and they change it right as we're getting started, like literally the night we're starting it. And the actress Finola Hughes was hosting it, and they changed the name to Who's Your Daddy? And Finola Hughes is this English actress, very lovely woman. But
yeah,
she's standing there, and I'm like 10 feet away when the producer tells her, and she goes, "I'm sorry, what? How do you expect me to stand there and look into the camera, look at these people with a face, and say, who's your daddy? What the fuck are you thinking?" And she's like, "I'm not gonna fucking do that." And it's it was hilarious. She goes, "It's fucking stupid." And 10 minutes later, she's like, and I think they actually maybe had to cut away from her because it was so bad. But yeah. But in order to get to where I am, I had to go through that.
exactly. Well, let's talk about how you got there. So obviously going right back to when you kind of decided to get into an industry. Were you a photographer first before you I know you used to work with Roger Corman, but what was the connection between photography and then your first job?
Well, oddly enough, it was funny because I was talking with my and it does actually go all the way back. My high school art teacher, and I had said I wanted to, I want to go to Hollywood. I want to like do Star Trek in Hollywood.
Wow.
And he was like, "Well, I don't know how to do that, but let's do that." But he gave me an extra credit photography class because we were going to do motion picture stuff. There wasn't a motion picture school class, whatever, but he's like, "We're going to do this AP class so that you can focus on that and figure out how to do that. And we'll do that." And we ended up I directed a movie, a Students Against Drunk Driving movie. And that was like him going, "Here, we have to have you do something. We'll figure it out as we went." But it all started with photography. And because I was interested in that, but that was basically in the early 80s when there was no digital. It was all shot on and videotape was just somewhat becoming a thing, but it was all photography. So you get into that, and then going into college, it was shooting with motion picture film and actual Super 8 and 16 millimeter. But yeah, that was, and I actually remember getting when I was about to get booted out of school for not paying my bills, I got a grant from the New England Camera Club, who helped out and gave me stuff. So photography has always been something that I've been interested in, and it wasn't really, I've always done it, but it was like getting serious into photography. I was always more about taking images and about the image and less about the tech. And I would say it's probably been the last 10 years that I've been more into the tech and actually making it more of an art form.
Yeah. So that was where you lived in Massachusetts then, where you started that. So living there, you've just decided, I want to go and work in Hollywood. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, that was really stupid of me. But it's literally, I mean, I can pull out a photo of me dressed up as Mr. Spock for Halloween in high school. So it was literally like, okay, no, I want to go to Hollywood and work on Star Trek. And like people like who see me like now, they're like, you would think that they'd be like, oh my God, it's so cool. It's like they're so pissed. They're like, you actually knew what you wanted to do and you went and did it. And it was impossible to do, and you did it. And I'm like, yeah, I did that. But it was like, it was just looking back on it, it's just so stupid because it was not in any way whatsoever an achievable dream. It's like, oh, I want to be in the Monkees. They're like, wait, I want to be the designer on Star Trek. It's like, well, in the 80s, they were only doing movies.
That's what I was going to say. You probably only had movies.
Yeah, they were like by that point they were into like Star Trek 4, and it's like it wasn't until I got to college, so I was already in college when they announced that they're doing the Next Generation. So it was like, so then it's like, okay, that's the thing. But I was basically going after a job that only 2 people had done before. So it's like not, but I also was into Star Wars. So it's like the idea of like, I'd like to be doing Star Trek. I'll do Star Wars, whatever. Yeah. But the fact that
I like Coke, but I'll drink Pepsi.
Yeah, exactly. I have to. But it's the thing, and it all sounds wonderful when you come up with a dream and you're going, but literally someone should have said, yeah, they have bad idea. This is not, you do understand it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And that would have just pissed me off enough to try it even more. But, but it's that thing. It's like so many times you go left when you could have gone right. But you end up where you're supposed to be at the end of it. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think the fact that you've kind of dedicated your thoughts to like, this is what I want to do. These are the things I've got to do to get. It's like I remember saying to my youngest son, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? He said, I want to be Doctor Who. I said, well, A, he's not real. B, if you want to play Doctor Who, you're going to have to be an actor. And so therefore you're going to have to go and do acting classes. But people want to be things, but never like do the work to get there. They just think they're going to go, hello, Dave Blass, would you fancy, we're short on the Star Trek set. Do you fancy like coming over to Hollywood?
Well, and I think that's a key point, which is, it's when you're given the opportunity, are you prepared for it? It's like sitting there going up, it's like going up to, I'm going to go play Major League Baseball, and you go up to the plate and the guy blows 3 pitches by you because you're not ready for it.
Yeah.
And it's like that for me was that thing where, the opportunity came around when I was ready for it. And I mean, I'm sure I could have done it years ago, but it was that thing that timing worked out and whatnot. But
so how did the Roger Corman connection come along then?
So Roger Corman used to be, for folks that don't know it, he was the king of B movies. And back in the day when there was a thing called Blockbuster, you would go to Blockbuster on a Friday night to rent Back to the Future or whatever Die Hard. And when you got there at 8:00, because you didn't get there at 6:00, there was nothing left. You couldn't get Die Hard because you got like a blue piece of cardboard where Die Hard used to be. And then you have to go to the 5 shelves over to get something because you're going to rent something. You're having a Blockbuster night and whatever. So they used to do all these straight to video movies, and in the 60s and 70s they did what are called B movies, and they would be that thing where you would go to the movies and there would be a B movie, which would be like a short movie, like an hour-long movie that would air before the main feature, because they had to provide you with a whole evening of adventure. No one's going to pay good money for just an hour of 2 hours of a movie. So it's kind of like the opening band version of movies. And the thing with Roger was you worked for him either when you were going up or coming down, and that was the fun thing. So you got everyone in Hollywood at some point, like in a certain that age bracket, had worked for him. So you had people like James Cameron had started out as a production designer like myself, and then got his first directing job there, and Francis Ford Coppola and Joe Dante and all these great people had worked for him, and that was kind of like where you went when you didn't know what you were doing. And they're like, here's $5 and a roll of duct tape, make me a movie set.
Right.
And you learn. And, you know, looking back at people like, oh my God, he took advantage of you, made you like $75 a week or something. I'm like, yeah, but he said, here's $75 and a duct tape, and it let us build a movie set.
Yeah.
And we learned how to do that. And we learned, you know, I'd go to Home Depot and like I had to paint all these sets. And I'm like, well, what color is the set? I'm like, well, I'd go to the reclaimed returns area in the paint. And there'd be like all these bad mixes of paint. And I'd be like, okay, well, I'll take these 5 shades of green and a 5-gallon bucket, and I put it in. That's what color the set was, because that's what we could afford. But then I learned to mix paint. I learned how to do all these things, and that, you know, one thing led to another, and that get you experience to then get the next job and the next job and the next job.
So was production designer the role you were looking for, or you were just like, I just want to work on Star Trek? What's the easiest way in?
The job I wanted was art director, and the only reason I know that because when I was a kid, I'd like to say probably in the 12, 13-year-old, I watched they had a making of special on Star Wars, or I think it might have been Empire or Return of the Jedi, and I remember watching that where you could go to the theater and watch it 10 times in the theater because it's never left the theater.
Yeah.
And I remember like trying to figure out who are the people who get to do the spaceships and do all that cool stuff. Because I saw them making the model, and I'm like, and I saw the title art director. I'm like, well, that sounds like the guy. He sounds like he's the guy. And I'm like, who's that art director? Joe Johnston. I'm like, I want to be Joe Johnston. And as fate would have it, I actually end up meeting Joe Johnston. And Joe is such a talented fellow, but he's also gone on to become a very talented director. He directed the movie October Sky. He directed the first Captain America movie, Jurassic Park 3. So really talented guy. But I met him at happened to go to the premiere of Captain America. And, you know, because he's not a named guy, he's not, you know, he was just at the party. I'm like, I knew who he was. No one else knew who he was. So I'm like, hi, I just want to go, thank you. Amazing film, by the way. But I am here in Hollywood because of you. And I tell myself, hey, don't put that on me. And and just the nicest guy in the world. And you know, I just, you know, talked to them a bit, and he was just so super gracious and everything. And then I reconnected with him a few years later when I was doing a show called Justified, and he was a huge fan of Justified. He's like, wait, you do Justified? Oh my God, I love that show. And I'm like, yeah.
I absolutely love that show. That was one of like the true first like limited. It wasn't going to run forever. It wasn't an endless. It was just going to be the storyline, and I thought that was one of the greatest shows on television at the time.
Yeah. So, you know, it's that thing. So you start going in one direction, you go in a different direction, and then, you know, people are like, well, you're so successful. I'm like, it's perseverance, because I know so many people who went to Hollywood and they didn't hit it big, and then they changed their thing and they went to do something different, and they got married. They made sacrifices to be with the home with the family and everything. And there you go. I didn't get married, didn't have kids, whatever. They said, oh, you want to go to Atlanta or Budapest, or, you know, like where I'll go wherever to go do the job. And, you know, it's like, oh, we want to send you to Ireland. I'm like, great, send me a plane ticket. Oh, we want to send you to, you know, I've done like 4 shows in Atlanta, New Mexico, New Orleans, whatever it takes. I just would get on the plane and go the next day. And a lot of people can't. But those decisions and that freedom to do that got me where I am. So,
yeah. So really it's the experience of, look, I'll learn from anything. I'll take any show, because I know I've watched a couple of your documentaries where you did behind the scenes at Justified in the prison, and looked at like the background, and you've done a lot of reality TV shows. Like we were talking about the Who's Your Daddy. So you've done all of those different jobs, and I think that's a lost art for a lot of people. Is they want to go to success immediately and don't realize that doing all those kind of crappy little shows or working with weird people that's just what you have to do to survive in the industry.
Yeah, and people don't realize it's like, you know, you get on a show like Star Trek and you're going, oh my God, it's a big budget thing. I go, No, we had to design like the bad guy ship, and we had run out of money. I mean, it was just like, everyone always said you ran out of money. I'm like, no, but we really hit it was a combination of ran out of money and ran out of time, ran out of room. Because we only had so many sound stages and there were sets on everything. And we're building the Enterprise over here and this set here and this set here and board. And it's like, well, okay, we need the bridge of a bad guy ship. I'm like, well, what do we got? And I'm like, well, I got the downstairs of a ship we've already, the La Serena. We don't really see the downstairs much. I'll do that. And I'll like, but I literally used a trick that I had used on Biggest Loser. And I tell people that this is what we're going to do. And they're like, I'm sorry, we're going to do what? I'm like, okay, we don't have any money, but I want a cool texture on the wall. So we're going to take window screen, we're going to crinkle it up, and then we're going to pull it apart, and then we're going to shine a light up on it from both sides and move the light so it will look like waves of energy. And you're just looking at people going, what the fuck are you smoking? I'm like, trust me, it's going to work. And they're like, and they're looking at me like, no, it's not gonna work. I go, it's gonna work. And they're like, how do you know? I'm like, do I tell them that I did it on Biggest Loser? Or no, I don't tell them. Yeah, it's gonna work. It's gonna work. And they did it. It worked perfectly. And so if you look at it on the bad guy ship, the Shrike, where it's a back, we use it in the background and all these. And it's like cheap as all get out. It's like window screen crinkled up, and it gives it this weird looking energy thing. And it's like, okay, that's experience, and that's when you get to that situation, it's like, here's how to do something cheap and cool.
It feels like you should have worked on MacGyver.
Yeah, you get a lot of that. And again, you try not to tell, because we're all tech people here as opposed to so much Star Trek people, but you try not to say it, but it's like, oh yeah, no, we reused every piece of every set, and it's like that set was. And people on the show, they're like, people are going to recognize this happen. I go, no. I'm doing a thing where I'm going to go whoosh, and no one will notice it because of the way I've done it. And everyone's like, but we're just using the same console that we just saw 2 weeks ago. And this, and this is the basement of the ship that I go, no one's going to notice. And then they noticed, but they're like, oh, that's cool. Look how neat that was that you did that. And, but yeah. So it's a thing of going, you take the experience of things and having to have that Roger Corman mentality where you change one thing into something else, and you would think, oh, by the time I get to Star Trek, I'm not going to need that anymore. And then you do, and it works out really well.
Because I like watching. First of all, I only buy Blu-rays because I like watching the making of the CV series or the film. I love that behind the scenes. If ever I come over to the US, I go to I've still got to go to Universal because I want to go to Hill Valley Square. I've not done that yet. But I've been to Paramount. I've done Warner Brothers, and just like being able to go on set and look around, and you see everything, and it's like what you see on TV and then what you see when you're on set, and it is just like wood and card and fake plastic. And so when I was watching your Justified video of the prison, and you were going, like even little things like, see the glass here, we have it so you can tilt it so there's no reflections. It's just all those little things I'm fascinated by, because it's probably only on screen for maybe a couple of minutes, but they're the things that make it either realistic looking or like a shitty set that everyone's picking foot. Like it's distracting from the acting. And well, it fascinates me.
Yeah, and you get into that with something like Star Trek, where there's the people who get it, and then the people who don't, and it's challenging on a show where you get it, and other people on the show is like, yeah, whatever. So they're looking at these control panels, and they're just like shapes and things, and the L cars, and you have to go to the actors and the directors and the people who aren't Star Trek people, go, oh no, this all matters. This is like flying. This is like driving a car. Just imagine this person is flying an airplane. You just don't randomly do that. It has a system of how you would do it. So I would have to go on the set and explain to an actor, here's how you would fly the ship. Here's how you would do it. It's this type of emotion. It's this. This is intended to be a gesture interface. So you don't need to touch the screen. you gesture towards it and the screen knows what you're doing. And this is you're going to actually touch, but this is you. And then once it's all been thought through. And that's why Star Trek works, is because all the tech is thought through. Even though it's fictitious, the idea of what it would do and how it would do it has been thought through.
Yeah, it's got a logic.
There's
a logic in it to it that makes it real in that universe and in the way that it works. And I have a terrible ADHD when I'm watching stuff, and I tend to look at everything going on and avoid some of the main action because I get distracted by things in the background. And the real key to a show that's good is that nowadays you can pause the stuff. Like in the past, when it was like you went to the movie theater, you couldn't stop in the middle and go, hold on a minute, could you back that up 10 seconds? I want to read that cell phone messaging, or the tag on the mattress behind him looked interesting. Can we stop? And nowadays, you've got these people who are going through the shows literally frame by frame.
In 4K.
That's got to make things a little more difficult. I mean,
it does, and it just makes you realize that, and also letting people know that you can't just put gibberish. Like we had at the without ruining it at the end of the season, there's a giant battle sequence, and there's like monitors with all the ships and the things, and I'm like, you have to figure it all out. It's not just because you're going, I know that there are people who will zoom in and freeze frame and know what each ship is and what the registration number is. And you have to kind of track all that stuff so that you know what you're doing, so that the fans know. But it's like, it's harder, but it's also more fun if you enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, if you think like Star Trek, Michael Okuda and forgive me, what's his wife's name? Is it Michelle? Denise. Michael and Denise, like every Star Trek fan knows who they are, and their job was to design those screens. So obviously when you're rebuilding that next gen set, all that stuff matters. I saw you posted a photograph of they came on set and had a look at it.
Well, that was one of my first phone calls. I'm like, I'm doing this. So I'm smart enough to know that I'm not smart enough, and that also that there's always someone better. I worked briefly on the movie AI with Spielberg, and I was in like a meeting, and it was like I was Waldo, because it was the who's who of Hollywood in this one little room looking at these models that we had built. And I'm like, it's Steven Spielberg, Kathleen Kennedy, the head of ILM, and just like everyone was in there. And then me over in the corner, and I was watching how Steven would interact with the people and how he would encourage people and be like, oh, you did this thing? Oh yeah, okay, that's really. He's like, I really love this blue. Did the idea of this and this one. I love this in blue. I hadn't even thought about it in blue. Had you thought about it in green? And it was such an interesting way to watch someone interact with people, because he could have walked in and said, that sucks. Why isn't it green? But he did it in such a way that you were like, oh no, yeah, greens, yeah, because he praised them. But it was, what I found most interesting is that he hired the best people in the industry to work for him. It's like, it's a bonus that he's him, and people want to work with him. But if you're going to do something, you hire the best people. The first call I made, I'm like, hey, Mike, do you want to come do Star Trek again? Because Mike had been out of Star Trek for over 10 years, actually almost 20 years.
Yeah.
So, and unfortunately, he was on another show, and that's part of the show business aspect, is that a lot of the people that I wanted were all on other shows. So Mike was doing For All Mankind. Doug Drexler, another great Star Trek designer, he was on Orville. I'm like, dude, you're doing the cover band. Let's do it. It's like, come join Judas Priest. It's like,
I do love the cover band.
Yeah. But and then like slowly they freed up, and so Mike was like, I don't really have time. We're doing this thing, and I'm like, okay, well, if for some reason, I don't know, if there's like a pandemic or something that stops everyone from working, and you are free to help us out, and that actually worked out great for us, horrible for the world. But he was able to come over and set us up. But yeah, we had Johnny. So I reached out to all the people who had worked on the show before and said, "Hi, I'm doing the show. Big fan. Let's get the band back together, both on screen and behind the screen." And that's what we did. Is we're like, we're not going to change what you guys had done before. We're just going to keep doing it, and let's see if we can do the thing that no band has done, which is to do a new song that's just as good as the old one.
Yeah.
And I think that's really that thing. It's like when the band gets back together, it's like you like to hear the old hits, but can you do a new album that's really good? And that's, I think, what we really went and tried to do.
So while we're on the subject of Star Trek, then, because I could ask you a million questions about this, what you've done these TV shows, you've obviously got a back catalogue of other shows you've done that's very impressive anyway. What was like moment one of you touching Star Trek?
Moment one of me touching Star. We did a set in season 2. It was a surveillance thing. It was like a Starfleet surveillance lab, and that was like the first Star Trek-y thing. Like we had done
season 2 of what?
Picard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So season 2 is very different because it's a time travel season, and it starts in Picard's present day, and then they travel back in time to our present day.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like Voyage Home, where they come back to our present time. So there was a lot of LA in present day and that type of things. But there was that set. But I think the first thing that really struck me that, like, oh my God, I'm doing Star Trek, was we did a set for Starfleet Academy at the Disney Concert Hall, and Picard gives this big speech. And we had actually done it, and we had to stop down because of COVID. So then we had to tear the whole set down, rebuild it. So we finally got back and we did it, and it was sitting there, and we were rehearsing, and Patrick Stewart comes out and he starts giving his speech. And I'm like running around. I got 8 million things I have to do. And I'm like walking across, and I just happen to realize I'm in the middle of the frame and the thing. And he starts his speech, and I go, holy shit, I am at Starfleet Academy watching Admiral Picard give a speech. And I just sat down. And I just sat down for an hour, watched the man do his thing. And I'm like, I am at Starfleet Academy.
Yeah.
And this is, it's like, I'm here. It's like being that rock star moment. It's like I'm in the photo pit. No, I'm going to sit and appreciate being here and take this moment in. And it was just pretty amazing.
Going back to that kid that I want to work on Star Trek. And then, so Picard season 2 was your first Star Trek experience as a production.
Yes.
Right. So how did that job come about?
Well, I had, luckily or unluckily, I had just been, I had signed on to do a series for Marvel called Ghost Rider.
Yeah.
It was they had done the Nick Cage movies, and we were doing a series for Hulu with Gabriel Luna, who was on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He had done so they started the character there, and we were on that for about 6 months. 4 to 6 months getting ready, to the extent that we had planted corn. The show took the episode season took place in a corn farm. We had planted the corn, and the corn was 10 feet tall, and Marvel pulled the plug.
No.
So we were like 2 weeks away from shooting, and they pulled the plug. And this was in like September, October. And yeah, so we were like all excited about that. And then it was like, and so then, and that was shooting up in Santa Clarita, where I was living, where we did Justified. And then going into it, then I got a call that, because I had talked to them about doing Discovery. So I was on their radar, and then the fact that I was in town and whatever, so they called me, met with the showrunner Terry Metalis, and it turned out we connected because we were both went to Emerson College.
Right.
My film teacher was his film teacher. We were actually friends with the kids and the teachers' kids, and it was there was a whole connection. And the fact that I was a huge Star Trek fan, and I had just come off not only Ghost Rider, but I had just done The Boys, and The Boys had just come out, and The Boys was a huge hit.
Yeah, I loved it.
So The Boys was a huge hit. So it was kind of like, okay, I had done that. That was my second project that I had done with Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. So again, the previous one being Preacher, which if you kind of put all these ducks in a row, it's like Preacher is kind of a modern day Western shot in New Mexico. I had previously done Justified, which was a modern day Western. And then I did from Justified, I also did Longmire, which is a modern day Western shot in New Mexico. So I'm like, okay, so I'm the modern day Western guy. Let me go do your show. So I was like, Preacher was the near thing. So then you get in with Seth and Evan, and just blow your mind creative guys. I can't say enough about how much fun they are to work with, but just creatively, their brain power is like Peter Jackson size. These guys are like, but they were gearing up to do The Boys, and they had spun off and done Preacher. They went to Australia to do Preacher, or the Preacher went to Australia, and I was like, I'm not going to Australia. And so they were like, oh wait, do you want to go to Toronto? You can go do the Boys. And I was like, yeah. So I go do the Boys. So it was one of those things. It's like, okay, I had done the gritty modern day Western stuff, so I wasn't the sleek, glossy superhero guy. But then I go and do the Boys. I become this sleek, glossy, superhero guy. And then one of our writers from Justified was doing Ghost Rider, which was also a modern day Western. So I'm like, oh, I've got the Marvel stamp, I've got the Boys, the thing, and then Star Trek presents itself, and I'm like, and there you go. And as it turned out, also shooting in Santa Clarita. So the set of Raylan's motel room is actually on the set where the Enterprise D was. So they're on the same exact spot. So it's kind of my career, like literally going, over the course of 8 years, starting out at that building, and then coming back around to do the Enterprise there was pretty amazing.
So it's got to be pretty cool when you do something like I'm a huge comic guy. I mean, I've been dealing with comic books and comic book art for decades. I've been going to San Diego Comic-Con since high school. I won't tell you what I dressed up as back then, but not a cowboy. How much fun is it to like get like The Boys and realize that your next bit of research is sitting down and reading, a whole bunch of comic books? Like, because you're taking a world that is not real and turning it into something that actually has to function in reality. It's
pretty amazing. And oddly enough, and again, not by connection or my personal connection, but The Boys was my third time translating a Garth Ennis comic into the screen. And then I went for the quad, the fourth time, doing Ghost Rider, which was right after the two, because he had done an arc in Ghost Rider. So it's pretty amazing. But I love it because their source material. And my thing is like, if you're doing something that fans already like, what is it that they like about it, and try and capture that feeling, and don't fuck with it. It's like, don't try and put your own stamp on it. It's like, okay, and that's why I always reach out to the artist and connect with them. And it's like literally with Preacher, it's reaching out to Garth and Steve Dillon. And, right. I got to connect with him right before he passed. And it was like, and he was so thankful for that. He watched it and he's like, you get it. And I'm like, yeah, I read your book. I'm like, I see what you're going for, and I'm going to try and it's like, so it was like one of the first things I did on Preacher. I didn't do the pilot. I did the season, and they had a church in the pilot that wasn't the church in the from the comic books. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I thought, well, they found a location or whatever. Then I found out that they built it. I was like, well, if you're going to build it, why wouldn't you build the church to be like the comic book? And for whatever reason, they didn't. And I'm like, that's cool. But then we go to shoot the series, and I'm like, okay, we got to change the church. And they're like, oh, but it has to match the pilot. I go, no, the pilot's going to match ours because we're going to just reshoot those and fix that and whatever. And they're like, no, we got to do it. I go, no, we're changing the church. It's really, and it became like this thing. And I'm like, and then I remember going into the meeting, and they're like, no, that's going to cost money. And I go, okay, look at the first issue of the comic book Preacher. It's the church.
Yes.
And I said, it's iconic. And your steeple is off to one side and it's this, and they're like, well, yeah. I go, okay, I know you already know this, but I'm just going to say it anyway. The church is a middle finger. The architecture, it's a middle finger to God. That's your story. You're telling your story. And they just looked at me and I'm like, yeah, I guess we're changing the church. And it's just like, I'm like, it's just, and then you sit there and you look at it again, like the journey of life, and you go, I had to have that moment. And then the entire marketing campaign for the first season of Preacher is the church. And exactly, I'm like, yeah, because it's iconic. You got to do the thing.
Yeah,
and
I have the entire run of that book. Sitting somewhere in my house. It was one of those, literally, and I've been in comic books since I was a child. Batman, started as a little kid. But the Ennis Dillon stuff was life-changing, and seeing those books and the way that story was written was unbelievable. And the TV show was one of those that I sat here and watched it on my computer, my second monitor, while I was working, and then I would go and rewatch the same episode on the big screen in the living room, so that I didn't have to I wasn't distracted. But more than that, I could then look at all the details after like getting the storyline. It was like rereading a comic book. It was like rewatching the show. It was so beautifully done.
And it started, and the first thing I did was I did Constantine, which was a Hellblazer series.
Yep.
And that was a hard one because I had been doing Justified, and we were getting ready to do the final season. And out of the blue, I got a call from David Goyer, and they're like, we want you to do Constantine. I'm like, we're doing the final season of Justified and this and that. But I'm like, Constantine's going to be huge. I mean, it's David Goyer who had written Superman and all these great things. I'm like, so I called the producers on Justified. I said, sorry. And it was in between seasons. That it wasn't like I walked away in the middle, but they were like, no, we understand, and whatever. So I went and did Constantine, and it was one of those things. We had just figured out really what we were doing on the show. The writers were getting it. They all got into a groove, and NBC pulled the plug. They were like 10 episodes in. We're like, and it was one of those things that had so much potential, and NBC was the wrong fit for it. It should have been on like a Netflix or an HBO.
Right.
Now it would have been great. But at the time it was very NBC centered. But again, that's the thing, is like that was my first introduction of like really delving into the nuance of the comics and how you have to get into the whole thing. But it's amazing how you get onto these shows, and again, it's part of the show business thing, is that you're hiring, for me, like 100 people, and you would like to think that the guys like doing the drafting or the graphics or the things would all be like, okay, we're doing Constantine, we're doing The Boys, we're doing Preacher. First thing I do is I bought a set of the comic books of The Boys, and I got the individual issues because you can get the big fat ones. But I'm like, no, because the cover art is really cool, and in the compilations you lose all the cover art. So I said, I want people reading them like they used to read them, like in a comic book. And I got them I said, you got to sign them out and doing. It never left the conference table. No one cared.
Wow.
And it's like you get people who are really good at what they do, but they're not that, it's like I wrestle with it. And I'm like, I go, have you guys read the script? And they're like, no. I go, aren't you interested? Really?
Yeah, you've got to be invested, haven't you, at some point?
They're not necessarily, that's not their thing. I mean, they're a, you tell them what the set is and what it's supposed to be, and then they're going to go and do it. But
that's where, like, the whole fan servicing the fans is, when something's gone wrong, because there's always the example of that's the only thing people talk about, even if it's something as simple like Tom Cruise playing Jack Reacher. He's too short. In the comic books, he's 6'6" and built like a brick shithouse, and you put Tom Cruise. Now, the TV series of Jack Reacher, they've cast the right guy, but it's those attention to details that one of the things I had down to ask you was the fan pressure of working on a show that has such it's not like a TV show is created from nothing, but you've got a source material like Walking Dead. It comes from a huge library, and you're bringing it to screen. Of course, you're going to change it slightly because you've got to give it that kind of its own identity, but you've got to sort of stay a little bit true to the original art. and that as soon as you fuck it up, people are straight on Twitter and social media and got this wrong, they got this wrong, they got this wrong. And that's what you don't want people talking about. You want them to talk about how cool the show is. Like, I never read the boys' comic books. Love the show.
Well, it's that thing. One of the things I would tell my team on Star Trek is, because I had mostly, I would say about 80%, 85% of the people on the show were not Star Trek people. So I said, okay, first, we're going to change your approach to what we're doing. This is not a sci-fi show. This is not a fantasy show. This is a historical drama that takes place in space. It's historic because there's 60 years of history. So imagine that this is just like a World War II film. You wouldn't put just a random chair there. You would put a period appropriate chair that is right for that time. You wouldn't just put a graphic. You would make sure that the font that you did was created in the time, that there's a history and how was it used before and blah, blah, blah. I said, that's what you have to do. I said, luckily this is, current day where we have the internet and there's a database and memory alpha. All the stuff's out there. You just have to know that you need to go look and that you can't ever assume that. So we had one instance where in season 2, the decorator had put a chair out there, and I said, "Oh, we can't use that chair." And he goes, "Why?" I go, "Well, that's the same chair that they use on the Discovery on their bridge." He goes, "People are going to notice the chair." I go, "Yes, they're going to notice the chair, and also when you're putting the chair there, what are you saying that I go, it's not even the same thing, which." Fine if you're doing it intentionally, but we're saying that chair that they use on the bridge is 100 years old.
Yeah.
If that's what you're trying to say, cool. But I don't think that's what we're trying to say. And we had.
I was going to say, was that something that must be a huge headache that you're having to kind of not only do your job, but kind of be teacher and educating and just keeping an eye out, like, because the thing, like, well, I do all the things because then I know it won't get messed up, but then as soon as you delegate, you kind of have to also keep an eye on the person you've delegated to. I'm sure Star Trek's probably like that because you've got the attention to detail, that stuff matters to you, and like you say, if you hadn't spotted that would have just been why have they done that?
And it happens, and there's 22 cringeworthy things. And a lot of times what I try and do is put something shiny over here so that everyone looks at the shiny thing and then they don't notice the other things over here. So if you put the shiny thing, oh, here's the shiny Easter eggy thing over here, everyone goes, oh, look at that. And they miss 20 other things.
Yeah. So that was another thing I'd written down was Easter eggs. So obviously you've worked on lots of shows, so you've got a lot of historical information, and then you come to Star Trek and then you get the chance for Easter eggs. And the callbacks in Picard were just on point. When you know that they're there, like you said, when the shiny thing's there, you're like, yes, they've done it. Do you get the opportunity to do personal Easter eggs, or is it kind of a scripted thing? Because I know like Disney, Pixar, they are super specific about the Easter eggs they put in. Does that come up in part of what your job is? Like, oh, by the way, you need to include this and you must have that, and put the flute in Picard's room from the episode.
Well, the way it kind of played out was I started out that he was going to have this chateau. The chateau in season 2 was going to be a character. So we knew that was going to be a thing. And then season 1, they had done his archives, and they had established this whole whatever room where you would go in and all the stuff was there. And I'm like, well, he seems that he's not that guy that would put all the stuff like in storage. He would have it in his library. So why don't we do the thing where we're just going to say that he brought all that stuff home with him. And there was so much stuff that they had done for season 1 that you didn't see. And then we went back to the original Next Generation episodes, and we're like, okay, so we're establishing that Picard lives in this house that his brother used to live in, that his family is living in. That's part of our story. That's key to the story for season 2, is because we go back in time to present day, and so it's the whole thing. It's like in 2024 in the time frame. We're at that shoto, and it's in his family. So this is a legacy property for him. It's got to feel like that there's history. And how do you tell history without just coats of paint and whatever? It's like, well, there's artifacts and things. So we looked at it and we're like, oh, okay, they're in his house in the episode family. They're like, oh, there's that platter above the table. There's that plowman sculpture. We took all the sets that were there, and we're like, okay, I want that. Let's find them, make them do it, whatever, and let's put it there. And then also, if you look at his office, his ready room in Next Generation, all the things that he gets on his journey end up in his ready room. The tapestry over the chair. So it's like, why would he behave that way in space and then come back to Earth and not have his stuff? So we're like, no, all the stuff that he would have it here, put it here, and then continue that journey. So in one episode, Picard, I forget the episode name, better with original series names, but he talks about they find a Promelian battle cruiser, and as they're going, he's all excited about it. Picard, this is one of the first and only times you see Picard giddy in Next Generation, because he's all excited because he's like, oh my god, this ship's old, and he's into to antiquities and archaeology, and he finds a ship, and he's like, did any of you guys build ships in a bottle when you were kids? Oh, I did. I built a ship. I'm like, well, but we see him as a kid, so it's a softball throw. It's like we see Picard as a kid. What is he doing? He's building a ship in a bottle, and then we. So, but that requires you actually watching the shows, making notes, and pulling things from that, and go, okay, we're going to add this, and then you put that all in, and then 20% of it ends up in the show. And so there's tons of stuff that you didn't see that was there. It's like at the end of the series, there's a scene with Data where he's interacting with Lore, and he's giving Lore his memories.
Yeah.
And they're physical items.
Yeah.
We had a table full of stuff, all meticulously recreated from the show. We had his paintings, we had this, we had that, and so you kind of have to know what are the important things to have, and then kind of spread them around, and also tell the history.
That must be weird, like especially on a show like Star Trek, where, like you said, you've got budget, but then there must just be budget for this stuff, because it's, oh no, we have the sets built and they've got to be meticulous, but you've also got to have all this stuff remade, because I'm sure a lot of stuff in the original series was sold off, auctioned.
Oh, next to nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it's like, but that's the whole thing. It's like you have to do something. So, again, if you're, it's just literally, it's like, oh, it's the Promelian battle cruiser in a bottle. Okay. Oh, we got to spend money to make it. No, you chop the end off a bottle, take an Eagle Moss model, stick it inside, and you're done.
Yeah.
And it's like, literally, that was what we did. So it's like, and other things that, we would call Rick Sternbach, who was on the original series. And we said, Rick, you did paintings for Picard that was used in Picard's ready room. Can we get those that artwork digitally? And we reprinted it and put it in there. And books. It's like all Picard's books. He was so into Shakespeare and things.
Yeah.
Like, okay, it doesn't take a ton to reprint the book covers and to do Dixon Hill books or So it's not like a giant, like, oh, we spent a ton of money to do it. It's like all the little things that you do, and then it's like, oh, okay, Picard always had a Nautilus behind his desk. Okay, go get a Nautilus. So it's like, there was going to be something there. If it was a vase, you paid for a vase, but a Nautilus just, makes more sense.
Did Picard, because you recorded back to back from going season 2 to season 3, and you obviously knew you were going to work on it. At what point did COVID hit that interrupted? Was it after season 1 or?
Well, season one had been shot, and COVID hit right as we were starting pre-production on season 2.
Oh, right, because I wasn't sure where the break was in that.
Yeah. So we were shooting in COVID the whole time. We were masks and face shields and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where?
Yeah,
So
we had one scene. We had one scene at Starfleet Academy, like where Picard gives his speech, and we were at Disney Concert Hall, but there was we were approved for what 25, 30 extras, so they had to digitally
yeah.
recreate them. But it was always a challenge.
So at what point in season 2 did you know, like, shit, I'm going to be working on the final of the Next Generation, and these people are going to start to come? I mean, obviously you had Q from Next Gen and some guests in season 2, but
Quite towards the end of season 3, season 2. It was way into season 2. Like, so I mean, we did, we knew that season 3 was going to happen, but I would say Terry Metalis, he left halfway, 3/4 of the way through season 2 to go start writing season 3.
right,
So,
okay,
yeah, and I just remember going into, then he's okay, well, maybe we're doing this, maybe doing that, and then he started coming. But it wasn't, here you go, here's what we're doing, starting the show. So then all of a sudden it became bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's like, okay, nope, we're getting everyone back. And that that was Terry's pitch. He's like, okay, he'd come to me and say, okay, I'm going to do the thing. I'm getting everyone back and I'm putting them on the Enterprise. I'm like, the Enterprise? And I go, so we have to rebuild the E? And he goes, no, the D. I'm like, how's that going to work? And he's like, we're figuring it out, but that's what we're doing. Figure it out. Figure out how to do it, but that's what we want to do.
And was that like, when you see something, when you read something like that that's coming, you're for me, I'm just imagining, like, now I'm in Nirvana, that now I'm in my the thing I thought of all those years ago when it went, like, Next Gen came out, you had the films, Next Gen came out, and here you are working on the end of that kind of thing. You'll get to rebuild all that stuff again.
Well, yeah, it's terrifying. No, see, I mean, everyone's like, oh my God, you must be so excited. I'm like, no. It's all of a sudden someone takes a giant weight and throws it on your shoulder going, I dare you to fuck this up because you're going to fuck it up. You don't have, wait, you're in the middle of a pandemic. You got this going on. You got, all this shit. I mean, and I could go down the litany of things that went wrong. It's like, Terry and I were just laughing the other day about the day we all came in and the production office was on fire. And it's like, and it didn't phase anyone. It's like you're just like,
I'm sorry. Wait. Your production office was actually on fire?
Oh yeah. Yeah, but literally that was the thing. It was like, it wasn't like, oh my God, this is the worst thing in the world. It's like, one more thing.
I mean, so you posted on Twitter. Was it like flood, famine, fire? Everything is coming.
Yeah, it was just unbelievable. It's just like, okay, one thing after another. I mean, and people, and again, we had the best crew, and it was the best support services. The network was taking care of everyone, but we're in the middle of a pandemic with COVID protocols, and people have had a wonderful amnesia, and I love that. But go back a year ago to where we all were. And we're working on a TV show where all of a sudden we go from season 2 to season 3, and the median age of our cast jumps by 20 years.
Yeah.
And we have, and all of a sudden you're going, oh, okay, COVID. Who does COVID not like? Older folks. And so we have to be super careful, and our protocols and things, and we had, and it was, I'm not saying anything that's not out there, but we had coming back from the holidays off campus, because you were tested coming back from the holidays before you went anywhere near the set. But we had 50 people test positive in one day. And so it was like, but they were all people. It's like, okay, they're like, okay, we're going to go home, spend Christmas with our family, whatever. And they all came back and they had COVID. And they're like, so they weren't allowed anywhere near set. Obviously, they were sent home. No one's got seriously sick. But those are 50 people that you have to replace. And then we had all these other instances of, with this happening and that happening. It was just like, yeah. So, but it's like you're sitting there going, all this is happening while you're trying to build the Enterprise and do this. And and figure out how to, literally, we're designing the Enterprise and designing the Titan ship and everything while we're doing season 2, because we finished season 2 on a Friday, started season 3 on Monday. So you're doing it all at the same time. So it's the same moment that I'm crinkling up window screen trying to figure out how to make a bad guy ship, that you're dealing with the Enterprise, and you're going, okay, I'm crinkling up window screen because we don't have any money, because I'm spending all of it on the Enterprise, which is what's important. So, but you still have to have, you got Amanda Plummer, and she comes on, and it's like, oh my God, talk about Amanda Plummer. That's interesting casting. And then we're all sitting there waiting, watching her first rehearsal, and you're like, okay, how's this gonna go? And then all of a sudden she launches into it, and you're like, holy fuck.
I know, she was like, badass.
Oh my God. She reminded me of Margot Martindale in Justified. Same, very similar, very sweet, nice, and whatever. And then all of a sudden, the switch flips, and she becomes this evil horror. And I'm like,
yeah.
And we're like, oh, we're good. And I worked with her. And it was such a wonderful experience working with her, designing the Vadic's chair, because she's like, I'm kind of, from the most of the show, I'm trapped in this chair.
Yeah.
So I want it to be kind of an extension of my character. I want to be able to sit differently and spin, and I want to have the thing. And then she's like, when she's like, I want to spin, I'm like, well, you mean you want to spin like your dad? She goes, what do you mean? I'm like, ooh, boy, I'm gonna have fun with this one. So famously, her dad played the Klingon commander in the Final Frontier. No, the Undiscovered Country.
Yeah.
I always mix up the two titles because the Undiscovered Country.
Yeah.
And play Kang. And that was the thing. I'm like, okay, he was famously, cry havoc and let wreak the dogs of war. And I was like, and the chair. So we kind of modeled the chair after his chair as an homage to him and her and the whole idea. And it was just like, wow. And she was just so appreciative and excited that we did that. But it was really nice. And she was like, oh, we measured her body so that it was wide enough so that she could put her foot up on the edge, and it's just good fun. But you're doing all of that stuff at the same time. You're like, okay, I need to spend money on the chair, so I don't have any money for the rest of the things. But it's like, okay, set deck's buying the chair, great, because they have more money, because there's not a lot of set dressing on most of the ship. So spend your money there, do a nice chair, and do this, and
yeah, make everything darker to hide things you haven't got. Yeah. How does, if you don't mind me asking, then, so, because I've always wondered, when they say a budget, like a film or a TV show costs this much, that much. Mm-hmm. You're obviously, a lot of the studios have in-house carpenters and prop makers and everything. No. So is the budget because you have to pay external people to make stuff that are assigned to the studio anyway? Like their job is, they know they're going to be making stuff, and do you have to like get quotes, or is it literally?
The studio system is gone, like, I want to say about 30, 40 years ago. So the idea that we're at a studio, not a thing. Right. We're at a bunch of, so it's like everyone just works on Star Trek. So it's not like, even though it's a Paramount show, we have no direct affiliation with Paramount, like their carpentry shop. It's not like Paramount's carpentry shop builds everything or whatever. So that's not really a thing.
So the budget is physically like spent on, okay, we need to make this now. Who can make it? You get a quote, you have to, and then the budget starts to suck down a bit.
Yeah, I mean, we have a construction team that is for the show. So we have 100 people. How many, this is what you can afford every week. You add people, you get rid of people, but you have this, our construction mill, and that's where everything's built. And with that group of people, Bob this week is working on the Enterprise, or the Shrike, and next week he's working on this. And so they move from one thing to another, and, everyone gets, so it's like, how many days does Bob work on Saturday? Does he work on Sunday? Does he go into overtime? That type of thing.
Yeah. Right. I've got a couple of fun questions for you.
All right.
So, have you appeared in anything you've ever worked on?
Yeah, like back in the OG days, when I was a prop master, I would play a cop, a doctor. What else did I play? I played I was a guy in a video getting married to someone. But no, they cast me as a Tellarite in Star Trek. And unfortunately, they had like the pre-done prosthetic. I didn't get to do the prosthetics. It was like, oh, basically here's the helmet you wear. And the helmet was made to fit a guy about $180. And I'm like, and I put it on and there's like, and I'm like, yeah, that's not gonna work. So unfortunately, no, I did not get to be, and I wanted to be in Picard. They cast the special take makeup guy as one of the guys that comes in at the end with 7 and but I did not. Terry did not offer me anything other than a Tellarite. So
you made the plaque. At least you made the plaque.
Well, I made the plaque, so I put myself on.
So, so you are in it. You are still in Star Trek. I know your wife was also in it as well.
Yes.
In the background. So at least.
Well, that was because we were trying to do these things. We were trying to do these billboards, and again, COVID things. And I'm like, okay, I need a Green Orion girl to do the thing. They're like, okay, well, we got to get casting. We got to cast someone. Then we got to get special effects makeup to do the green. We got to do a photo thing, lighting, with it. And begin this whole thing. I'm like, no, I just need someone to be green. And I said, honey, guess what we're doing this weekend? And we just did it in my living room. And it's like painted her green and shot it and I put it up. And I'm like, and then it became that thing. And I'm like, okay. And people are like, oh, okay. They're like, how'd we do that? Oh, we did. And I just like, yeah, I shot it in my living room. I'm like, just, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But, so it was fun.
So the other thing is, you might not be able to answer this question because I know actors always hate answering it. I'll ask you, have you ever taken anything from set that you still own? Or I can rephrase it, like, if you could have taken something from set that you'd like to own, what Trek-related objects would they be?
Everything. Was what I wanted. Yeah, everything. But no, on Star Trek, I remember the day that they had like legal people show up, went to the actors' trailers because everyone wanted their jacket. So we had these field jackets, and they were just and Michael Crow, who designed them, they were what they look like on. I tried on Rikers. I was like, it goes on like a silk suit. It's just like,
wow.
Oh, this is so badass. And everyone wanted it. And they were like, yeah, we're going to take it. And no, legal's like, so yeah, no, but I mean, and you can understand it because it's like, you look at the auctions, like back in the day, you'd finish a show and the props would go back into the prop house. And I remember, going to the Paramount prop house back in the day, and you would find just all these treasures, but you had to know what you were looking for. But they would just put them back in, and they would just put them back into circulation. But with Star Trek now, it's like a phaser goes for $15,000.
Yeah.
Which it just always tweaks me because it's like when we're sitting there having budget issues and we don't have any money, I go, we need money for this thing. I go, you're going to sell that thing for 15 grand. Why can't I get $8,000 to build it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, but, so that was the thing. But there was so many things on Star Trek that you're like, oh, I wish I could have got that. Wish I got that. You wish, everything from like, the captain's chair to the big high ticket, what everyone wanted was the plaque.
Yeah.
It's like, it's that thing. But what did I get? I literally, we had a thing in season 2 where we went into an alternate universe, and we start with 7 of 9 on the La Serena in the good universe, and then we the next episode we're in the bad universe. So we had all these cargo containers, all with like medical labels and things like that. And then we went to the other universe and we had to cover them up with bad guy ones. So they had to look like from Confederation to Federation or
Yeah.
vice versa. So some of them were blue, and then the bad ones were red. So very, on the nose. But I had a whole. So they were literally going through and taking them off and throwing away. I'm like, well, guys, you can't just throw them away. That's worth like money. And everyone's looking at me going, for stickers. I go, no, screen use stickers.
Yeah.
And then everyone's like, okay, and we don't have time to save stickers, and they're like pulling it off. So literally I snuck in and I took a bunch and I put it on plexiglass and saved a bunch of the stickers as we were pulling off and whatnot. So yeah, I'm sure legal is watching. I didn't get anything.
That's what,
swear on Scouts honor.
As he sat there in that big chair that was chair swinging round. Yeah. Me, this old thing, I've had it years. It's 100 years old.
Yeah. Oh, but no, and that was the thing. It's just all the stuff that I'm like, well, what about that? What about that? And it's like, and by the end of the show, it was just like, so it was a little bit of a challenge because at the end of the show, you would like to think that everyone sits there and is excited and celebrates each other. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We're over budget. We're running out of time. We got to get off the stages. And it's like, how quickly can we get the sets off the stages, because they can't afford to pay $20,000 a day or whatever they're paying for the stages, because there's another show coming in. So everything gets put in boxes. So, like anyone else, I may have to go buy something at one of these auctions or something.
Yeah. So, two questions, then, so I don't forget.
So to answer your question, I'm also extremely smart when it comes to things like this. So I do have the best Star Trek book collection.
Right.
And when I say book collection, I mean screen use books.
Right.
And why, it's like, oh, you got to keep that? I go, no, I was smart enough that I bought the stuff myself beforehand. So my books became, so we're like, oh, rather than you having to go buy the Globe Shakespeare book, you can use mine for free. Oh, saving you money. Just make sure I get it back when we're done.
Yeah, that's clever.
So it's like, as far as, is there so the prop Star Trek prop I always wanted for me was my kind of holy grail, was I always wanted the Tale of Two Cities book that Spock gives to Kirk.
Yeah.
And so Rathacon. So for me, that was like, that is because it's a moment, it's a thing. So that's the thing I always wanted. So there are 2 screen use copies of Tale of Two Cities. One was used in Star Trek to the Wrath of Khan. The other was on Geordi's desk in Star Trek Picard. I just happened to make a replica of the exact replica of the book and put it on Geordi's desk. So now, yes, I have one of 2 screen use Star Trek copies of Tale of Two Cities.
That's good, because it's your stuff.
It's my book.
Yeah.
So there you go. So do I get the bonus of that? And it's not, I'm not going to sell the damn thing. But yeah, that was, so I basically roundabout got my holy grail of props.
Yeah. Do you know what I would have taken if I'd been on set and I could have got away with it? I would have taken the pack of cards that they finish as the camera comes up as them playing poker. And I'm sure one of the actors would have kept those pack of cards. But that even just one card, I would have wanted that.
That was like the funniest thing, because our prop master Jeff Lombardi was so amazing for 2 seasons, just a meticulous attention to detail, everything. That was the only time that there was any hiccup, because he shows up, final scene, and you can see it on the screen,
right?
And they're all playing cards, and they're all and everything, and he shows up with a stack of chips. And we kind of like all looked around like, but there's a lot of them. How many? And it's like, and everyone wants to have a stack of chips in front of them.
Yeah.
But he had like that much for each person. And they were like, but they were custom. They were exactly the chips that they were sure. And it was like, the prop itself was perfect. He just didn't have the money to get like a bazillion made. So I got as many as I could for the money that I had. And they were like, fuck. because we're all thinking the same thing. If you had told us, we would have bought more and we would have all kept some. And but if you watch the Top Shot, you can see everyone's got like 8 chips in front of them, and it was never like the stack of chips that everyone had hoped to have. But,
I need to go back and watch that now.
yeah.
So I appreciate time-wise, Dave. I don't know how much longer you've got.
Oh, we're good.
So obviously Picard has wrapped up now, and it was a fantastic, and the work you did on it, mate, was first class. It was just everything was just a joy to see. All the special effects, just the little bits, and that I noticed a lot of the nice callback touches. Now that Picard has finished, and everybody's kind of seen, I'm not going to give away the ending for those who haven't seen it yet, but there is an opportunity for this to continue, and people are talking about Star Trek Legacy. Have you got the opportunity to continue working in the Star Trek universe?
There's, as Kirk would say, or Bones would say, there's always possibilities. And
right.
So, and so the key thing is Star Trek Legacy wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
It was 100% not on, like when we're doing the show, we're not like talking spinning off. We're like, can we trip, fall? How can we get over the finish line?
Yeah.
Because we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're, hemorrhaging money, doing the thing. How can we get done with this show? And that was that thing. Can we finish? So then the show comes out, and and also we did the part of the thing of shooting it back to back. We shot season 2 and then season 3, and then season 2 comes out. Well, season 2 didn't have the reception that season 3 had. So then you're going, oh, okay, fans liked it, some didn't, whatever. And then you got 6 months between that and season 3. So in that time, there's no studio going, let's talk about Legacy.
Yeah.
Because they're like, what, you want another season of that show that was okay?
I think, yeah.
No, yeah. And we're like, we're just hoping the third season's good. And everyone we're like, no, season 3 is awesome. Season 2 is great, but season 3 is awesome. And so then season 3 hits, first episode, and people are like, damn. And then episode 2 was like, and people are like, whoa. And then they're like, okay, but it's going to go down now. And then it goes up again. And it got better. And it was like, oh, and I told Jonathan Frakes, I said, hands down, episode 4 is one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek ever. Because he directed it too, and it's like he is one of my favorite people in the world. I mean, probably the best gift the Star Trek gave was getting to work with him on a regular basis.
I bet,
because he was like one of the only people that I actually got to meet and interact with. Because when he was directing, he would do 2 episodes, so we would spend 3 weeks every day, all day together. So it was just like, and talk about meeting someone that you hope would live up to your dreams, and it's like, oh my God, just the nicest man in the world. But to see him in front of the camera, I knew him as Jonathan Frakes, the director, and I had this idea of Riker. I had never seen him as Riker. And all of a sudden you see Riker in front of you. And you're like, fuck. And then he does that. And you're like, oh my God. It was just like, yeah.
It's like straight back into Riker again.
Yeah. And the best Riker, that episode is the best we've ever seen Riker. And it's just, all of a sudden you see this and you're going, and that was for me the moment I'm like, this is something pretty good. It's like, this is, yeah. And it's like, but you see that, and then all of a sudden the audience saw it and they're like, holy shit, that episode was good. And now we just saw it like a week or 2 ago, the ratings, because the streaming ratings are slower. The ratings came up for that episode, and it's the first time that Picard broke the top 10 in ratings.
Oh wow!
And now everyone's going, whoa, what? And we're all, and we knew we're like going, that's episode 4. Everyone just and by episode 4, it doesn't go down. It just goes. I go, so we're waiting for the new ratings, and the studio's like, okay, well, we have this all in line. We don't have a slot for Legacy. We don't have plans for Legacy. We have Section 31. We have Starfleet Academy, Prodigy, Strange New Worlds. So but they're also going, okay, maybe, and then the buzz. So by the time the finale hit and the buzz was through the roof, and people were like, "This is the best show ever. This is the best Star Trek," and then people like, okay, I think we can't ignore it now. And it was like it's like what happened with Strange New Worlds, the Pike episode. People like, oh, we love this Captain Pike thing. We want it, and they did the petition for that to get its own series, and they're like, yeah, okay, we'll do that. The Legacy petition has just exceeded that petition, and the fans are like, oh no, and it just makes so much sense. So it's like, and then now they're realizing, oh, Terry actually thought about this beforehand, and it's kind of like the ending of Star Wars when you realize it's like, oh, wow, Lucas said episode 4.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, oh, you walk into this thing and it's not anything, and it's a giant shit show, and then it comes out and it's awesome. And Lucas is going, yeah, that's why I put episode 4. There's a lot of story to tell. And that's why it's like at the end of this, it's like Terry's like, oh, okay, Jackson the Thing, and we rename it the Enterprise and the thing. We're like, here you go. Here's the thing that everyone's asking to do. We want a diverse cast of people. We want strong female characters. We want adventure. We want positivity. Where they hand it to you. Here you go. And you didn't even know we were giving it to you when we gave it to you. And you look at it and you go, oh, wow, 7 of 9, captain, female captain. Raffi, and they have a relationship. And then Jack, and the LeVar Burton's daughters, or Geordie's daughters, like, okay, diverse cast of thing. Wow, it's set up to be the thing that everyone says we should be trying to do, but now everyone's asking for it, and here you go. Yeah. So I think that they're strongly looking at it, but the problem is that as of yesterday, we have a writer's strike.
Oh, really?
So yes. So yesterday, after talk for the last 6 months, since 2008, yesterday started the writers all walked off. So we are in the middle of a writer's strike that, by all accounts, will not end quickly.
Oh dear.
So that means that any meetings, phone calls, any action whatsoever regarding Star Trek Legacy, time out. So that stops. That even if they had said, "Hey, we like this, let's do this," Terry can't. They can't put the writers together. They can't start talking. They can't do the thing. It's not So now it's just TikTok. So if you think about it, we were doing season 3 in the January of 2022, and it just came out. So you're looking at a good year.
Oh wow!
Before we could start shooting,
right?
So it's that thing of like, people are like, oh, let's do this thing, and you're like, come on, in like 6 weeks or something. The ship's gone, everything, and it's like, so it's that thing. It's like, nope, it's literally starting from scratch again. So I would be one of the few designers who gets to, if we did that, it's like, hey, I got to build, take down, and build the Enterprise again. 2 of them. So there you go.
So what was the last day of filming on Picard 3 then? Was that January 2022?
No, I think it was like March 2022.
So you've had a year. So when you finished the end of Picard, you obviously realized you had something special there, but you've got to wait the year for it to be edited and put together and come out.
Yeah.
What have you been working on in that year, and what have you got coming up now?
In that year, I actually relocated to Toronto. My lovely Orion wife lives in Toronto. So we were separated during the pandemic, and that was less fun than it should have been. So I moved up here also because I travel so much with work. It didn't make sense for her to move to LA and then have me go on the road, and she's in LA. So her family's in Toronto. So I said, I'll move up there. So I came up here. I worked with Terry Metalis, the showrunner. We did a pilot at the end of last year for Witch Mountain, Escape from Witch Mountain.
Oh, you're joking.
Yeah, so that was for Disney Plus. So Disney hasn't decided if they're going to pick up the pilot or whatever. So But yeah, so I moved to Toronto, and then as not as if it wasn't part of the grand plan, it's part of the how do you connect all the dots and to be in the right place at the right time. They just announced two brand new Star Trek, a Star Trek movie, Section 31, and a Star Trek series, Starfleet Academy. Both Star Trek shows are shooting in Toronto. Yeah, where I happen to live. Hey, so we'll see if if all the dots in the universe connect, and I find myself back, have a place for all my Star Trek books, and where I'm actually getting to write them off as business expense.
Yeah.
So
do you are you like, how are you represented then? How do you find work, get work? Is it just purely that word of mouth and reputation and
Oh, I have an agent, and they make calls and everything. But again, we're in a really challenging time right now because everyone's been knowing that this writer's strike has been coming up, and I'm one of the first people to be hired on a show because we do pre-production and we start building well in advance. And studios didn't want to start doing things, start building sets, because if I start building a set, then I'm spending $20,000 a day on a soundstage that I can't use, but I also can't take the set off. So we're not going to start doing anything until the writer's strike is. So it's been a slow burn of a year so far. So we'll see. I mean, but like I said, thousands of people right now are out of work and going to be out of work. And hopefully everyone the strike gets resolved and everyone gets what they need in order to move forward. So
is this like the previous writer's strike from way back? Where is it the similar thing? Is it pay? Is it conditions? Is it?
It's mainly the streaming universe is a completely different thing, and everyone, if you think back to Star Trek: The Next Generation, you used to do 22 episodes or 24 episodes of Star Trek, and that used to get you like a whole year. If you figure it, it takes 24 episodes, 2 weeks an episode, you're getting a year's worth of work out of that.
Yeah.
Now all the streaming services are down to like 10 episodes or 9 episodes or 12 episodes. So now you're getting half a year of work. So with a lot of them, it becomes a bigger thing where studios, they want to lock up the writers so that they're only working on the show, but they don't want to pay them for the 6 months of the year. So they're like, oh, we'll pay you a little more, but we want you exclusive. But then also, streaming rights, it's different. It used to be the writers would get a fee like every Thursday night when Seinfeld would air. Seinfeld would get paid for his show being on. And when they would rerun it, he'd get another check and so forth. Now everything's on a streaming service. So how do I know, like, when does my show air? Well, it drops, but how many streams does it get? Well, as you know, most ratings, they don't release ratings. So it's like, and then like a Netflix show, and we all watch Netflix or Amazon, you put the show on, you hit play, and it goes to the next episode. It does that thing at the end of it, and then it just runs right into it. Well, the writer's like, well, okay, my episode was played twice. Episode 1 and then episode 2. And then the streaming service is like, well, but are they watching it? Because Netflix has to put up the thing and goes, are you still watching? Because if you don't turn your cable box off, it just keeps playing till you get to the end. We're not going to pay you, Mr. Writer, for 10 episodes of a show that no one actually watched. That doesn't make sense, because they didn't. So it's really, and it's streaming, and it's how many people that they can hire for, and it's all the different things, and most of them are above my pay grade and things. Everyone, it's harder to get work because you're not getting hired on for a longer run, so your time off or in between shows is a lot more. So it's
they're also starting to have to address the whole AI writing TV shows part of it, because stick an outline into some producer comes up with an idea, sticks it into some AI program and says, there, it's written. Now what happens? And there's a lot of issues that they're trying to figure that out with. And it's
and again, I mentioned it with some other people. It's like, and also these contracts that they're doing are not for a year. That it's for several years, and it's the idea of like, how will the technology evolve to the extent of, can I take a digitized book? Can I take a Harry Potter book, put it into AI, and turn me into a film script? Now, it may not be a great film script, but it's going to be a film script that then someone else can put notes on, and then they've just done. It's like AI for artists. And we're, as a designer, we're going to run into the same thing, because I'm going to get some producer who will say, "Here, I did this AI stuff. I wrote in Star Trek spaceship on my AI computer, and here's 5 ideas. I like this one." That's going to happen too. With not so much with Star, but it will be with anything and everything. So all of these things are going to come to pass, and we got to figure out how we all move forward. Because to say that it's not going to impact it, it's going to.
Oh, massively.
I liken it to the sign painters. There used to be guys that, if you watch the beginning of the movie Seven, Morgan Freeman's door, the guy's hand painting it.
Yeah.
And then, later he's and it's like, yeah, you used to have to hand paint your name on the door. Now you get it's cut out in vinyl letters.
Yeah.
So there is no painter. There's a graphic designer. So the sign painters, and you go down the line of all, there's no more guy loading the camera with film. That job went away. So,
Right.
And AI is doing a lot of that. I was watching for you guys to do podcasts, this app that basically takes a multi-camera thing, and it will automatically edit it for you based off the sound thing. Cut. And I watched the demo, like, wow. And then you go, it's not perfect, but it allows you to, like, it does 60% of the work. So you can go tweak it, and I want to do this, but it cut your time down.
Oh, I mean, I've seen some stuff coming out that I can't describe in any detail at all. But if you would have told me about it 3 or 4 years ago, I would have told you that you are out of your mind. It was never going to be possible. I have now seen it actually working, and I can't imagine how much better it's going to be in 2 years from now. I mean, it looks like magic. It is so stunningly incredible.
And it's that thing of going, because people are like, well, no, it's really the artist and the thing. I go, it's another brush in the tool, and it's how we do it. It's it's the thing of going, every time we do that thing where we circle something, we go content aware fill. You're using AI.
Or you're doing the new remove tool that they've just released. Is someone sent me an iPhone picture the other day with a person photobombing a group of people. He jumped in front of the camera, in front of the crowd, doing one of those really weird things. And the Photoshop remove tool took out 98% of it in 1.5 seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, it was something that I could never have edited in by hand. Would have taken me 10, 12 hours to just get a rough idea. This thing literally did it in less than 2 seconds.
Is it released yet, or is it a beta?
Oh no, this is in the beta release now. It's out. The remove tool is out publicly, right, Dave? Or we're gonna have to cut this.
No. It's
out.
It's been advertised on the internet. You just made me think of someone, Dave. Apart from the fact that you are connected with Alan, there is also someone I know, a really good friend of mine, who's very strongly connected to you, which is Paul Shipper, who did the poster art for Picard. You know, the one with the floating heads, the movie poster. Paul's a huge Star Trek fan, and I got to meet him through a mutual friend. So it was quite cool that somebody else I know had also worked on the Trek universe, and they've done all the Picard artwork. So I keep seeing his artwork all the time. It's really cool when like you guys are sharing it, because it's like, oh, I know Paul, he did that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the end of part 1 with our interview with Dave Blass. If you go back onto the app, you're going to find part 2 of this interview with him on He Shoots, He Draws. And once again, thanks for joining us.